going to call this committee meeting to order, the RTM Public Safety Committee on April 8th, and it is 6:02 p.m. And we are here to discuss the FY22 budget. And members present are Representative Kate Richards, Representative Melinda Kasiri, Representative Ian Thomas, and myself, Representative Jill Rusk. And let me just scroll to make sure I am not missing anybody. Also present are RTM moderator Sima Evans, Groton Long Point President David McBride, Groton Town Police Chief Pissarro, Groton Long Point Chief of Police Knowles, I believe City Mayor Keith Hedrick is on. Who else is with you, Mayor Hedrick?
Chief Spellman and Finance Director Ron Uhas.
Thank you. Am I missing anybody? Okay. So our first item to discuss is public safety account number 1024, which is public safety. There is a motion from the number that was given from the town council was 9,258,908. If I can get a motion for that number to start discussion, and then we can go from there.
Rep Kasiri, I so move.
Thank you.
Second that, Richards.
Thank you. Okay. For discussion, we are starting on page 109 or 107. Is there any discussion on this? Chief Pissarro, do you want to just give a short overview? I know we don't want to go too long tonight, but if you want to give a short overview on what your increases are, that may help.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
I know many of you probably watched the town council meeting. I went into a lot of depth with them. I certainly welcome any questions, but the highlights are, as you all know, the Public Act 20-01, an act concerning police accountability, went into effect this year. And as a result of that, there are some additional costs to the department. A lot of these, I would say, are requirements that police departments across the state of Connecticut are going to have to implement. There are costs associated with them. I've tried to lay out what those costs were in my budget. I did an addendum with some estimates by line item. We have to require officers to undergo every 3 years drug testing. There's a cost for the drug testing. For those officers that are not working, we have to pay them in order to do this. They cannot do it during break time. They can't do it during lunchtime. If they're not working, we have to send them, and we do have to pay them. We'll make every effort to make sure that we do that during the working hours, but if for some reason we can't do that for our midnight and evening shifts, obviously we have to pay them overtime. Same applies to psychological testing. There is a cost associated with psychological testing. Police officers do get psychologically screened before employment. It is a pre-employment requirement here in Connecticut, as is a polygraph, what's commonly referred to as a lie detector. However, the police accountability has implemented this across the board. So incumbent officers, every 5 years have to get screened by an approved psychologist or psychiatrist. There's a cost associated with that. Clearly, going to see a doctor for this type of a mandatory checkup is wise, but there is a cost associated with it. And just like I explained with our police officers that are not working, we need to require them to go to this. We will try to do it during their working day, but if there's shortages of staffing or if they're on an off shift, we'll have to make other arrangements. And I've put together some modest estimates on what that would cost. We also have to implement a camera program. And while that's part of our capital improvement budget that you'll be looking at too, I just want to hit on it real quick. We made a conscious effort to be the first police department in Eastern Connecticut, with the exception of one of the tribal nations, to get on body cameras. I had presented that to the council and the RTM several years ago. It was, I believe, a good move. It was a hard move and met with some skepticism. but yet we've come to realize the benefits of that transparency in doing that. However, not only is that a requirement now moving forward, we also have the requirement of in-car cameras. We have a few in-car cameras, which quite frankly are beyond their life expectancy. We have to now outfit each one of our patrol vehicles with cameras. So you'll be seeing that as part of the capital improvement project. And the big thing that I see is training. We are now looking at a change in the way we do use of force. There are some changes to the law. The officers, all of our officers, and I can speak for, I think every police officer in Connecticut will require training to make sure that all those things that they were taught in the case of, I think myself and the other chiefs on here, we were taught over the last several decades, each of us on how, what the standard is for use of force under Tennessee versus Garner, Graham versus Connor. And now Connecticut has a slightly different standard and it will require training. We need to complete that by January 1st of this year. So I've got an officer that is currently on the statewide committee to do that. He's going to implement the training. I spoke to him as recently as yesterday. It is going to be a heavy lift. Each one of our officers will have to undergo that training. And just like everything else I mentioned, there's overtime and costs associated with getting the officers in and completing that training. It isn't just, a couple hours. It's pretty in-depth training, and we expect the curriculum that will be promulgated by the Police Officer Standards and Training Council will require a certain amount of hours. So those are some of the bigger items that we put in this budget. But in addition, I heard the RTM and I heard the council when they discussed some police accountability issues and some of the things that they wanted from the town department. And some of that was in the court report that I was privy to. We've looked to incorporate a social worker into our department. We've done a lot of research on that. There was a requirement that we satisfied to do a feasibility study of a social worker responding to calls exclusively embedded with the police department. I will tell you, seeing it more, reading up on it, and researching other departments that have fielded this across the country, I'm more committed to that now than I was even at the outset. Reading some of my colleagues' reports and white papers and some of the things that they've seen a benefit from this program with, I think it would be useful to the town of Groton. And I say the entire town would certainly be willing to share that resource with their partner agencies, and I made that known to the council. I do think it would be good overall for our town as a whole and for our policing services to have this capability. So that was incorporated into our budget, as was an additional community policing officer. We have one officer dedicated to community policing that's above and beyond our patrol force. And both of those I saw as highlights in the consensus recommendations from the corporate report. So I know it's been important to certain members of our town council as well as the RTM. So those are the major factors that are incorporated into our 4.1% increase, which I believe is consistent with the other departments in town. Maybe a little bit more, but again, it's incorporating a couple additional positions. So those are the major factors, in addition to things that occur every year. We have collective bargaining agreements with both the dispatchers union and the police officers union that expect increases in salary. So that's incorporated into our budget as well. And we have recently lost several officers through attrition. Those will be replaced. So our staffing, or we're expecting to lose, I should say, some officers through attrition. We've lost several dispatchers, again, through natural attrition and retirements. All those positions will be fielded or filled and staffed in the coming months. So those are the highlights. Representative Rusk, I'd certainly welcome any questions.
Thank you, Chief. I've got the town hand up.
Yeah, I just have to bunch in real quick. I'm sorry, I was out of the room, but I thought I heard the chief say that he had an addendum that, did you, Chief Rosario, did you say you had an addendum to your budget?
I provided additional information to the town manager. I don't know whether that was
okay. I don't know if you sent it to the committees. I know I don't have it. So if you could send that to me, to my email now, I can forward it to the committee members right now. It's important you have it now, but I can send it to the full RTM tomorrow, Can't hear you, Chief. You're muted, Chief.
Let me pull it up on my screen here right now, and I can kind of give you where I've, am I sharing screens now? Do you see it? There's a spreadsheet showing?
It's up, yes, it is.
It is, all right. Just to, you know, this is, again, a rough estimate of some of the things that I saw were either direct or indirect costs as a result of the police accountability bill. Again, having been involved in this process with the Police Chiefs Association, the state did provide mandates. The legislature did pass this law, and the fiscal note attached to this was not large, but there's you know, I think that's because a lot of this is going towards the cities and towns to have to implement. So if just to go down the list, our in-car cameras, we're estimating about $214,000. Again, that's a capital improvement project over the course of 5 years. We want them to integrate with our body cameras. So we will be more than likely utilizing Axon, who we did a request for proposal when we got our body cameras. I added the body cameras on here. That's not part of the cost, but just to kind of give you an idea of what the annual costs are associated with our body cameras and what we would expect with the in-car cameras is about $35,000. That's for storage. We use cloud storage. We use their redaction software. It is considerable. We do get requests for these videos, and it requires one of our employees to go through utilizing the redaction software, either putting it on the cloud, burning it to disk, and providing it to both court and to officers and to citizens who request it. The cost of the social worker right here, $55,000. That is basically a social worker's salary based on what we have already in the town. Social worker 1, psychological testing. I came up with some rough estimates. You know, a fifth of the department annually will have to get tested. So that's incorporating what the cost is. We're figuring about $475 a piece. It may be less. I was trying to give conservative estimates here. And overtime associated with people that can't go during their regular workday. I gave a guess, best guess of about $1,600. That's based on their current rates. How many people we would have to send, again, an estimate. CALIA, I don't believe I mentioned that, but one of the provisions of the police accountability bill is the CALIA, which is an international accreditation from the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. The initial cost is $11,000. We've been heading in that direction already. You can't see him, he's off camera, but Deputy Chief Gately's been heading that up. We've met with representatives from the service that we're using to get us to accreditation, and the project is underway. It hasn't come to fruition yet, but we are working towards that and getting very close. Training, again, this is all of our officers in the department, from the newest officer to myself, for overtime associated with bias-based policing, de-escalation, and use of force, fair and impartial policing. That's overtime. What we came up with again, a best guess. We don't know what that training looks like yet. I do believe it will be comprehensive. I do believe every department is going to have similar concerns about getting their officers trained in the timeline that's been given to us. So there's a cost associated with that. Drug testing. Go down the line here again. Every 3 years for an officer, they have to get drug tested. We're trying to do it in concert with their recertification training, which is required. So we're not sure what that would cost. This may be high, the $300. We might be able to get it a little bit less. When I put this chart together, that was the assumption that we went with. And then overtime, again, a modest amount for overtime for replacement costs. And the community policing officer, that's the entry level pay for a police officer. I added this as well. This was discussed a couple of months ago with the town council, which is the community service officers. That program, we're starting to get off the ground now, using this year's funds to start getting a couple of people in the pipeline to hire before the summer. And then last item on here is we use a software called Powerdms. It's a digital management software, document management software. Basically, all of our policies are promulgated on that. When they're updated, the police officers see it through an app on their phone or through their computer. They have to sign off on it, but it also has features that allow us to take our policies and make them outward facing. So if someone from the public wanted to know about our policies, they would be on the website They would be updated constantly. So if we had a change in policy today, again, Deputy Chief Gately is the one that handles that. If there was a revision or there was a requirement to add something to a particular policy, it would be real time. Once that was updated and put through that system, it would be outward facing and available and accessible to people in the general public. That's an important thing. We've started doing that already. So some of our CLES policies, which is the lower level tier of approval through post, every police department is required to be CLES validated. Those policies are on our website now, but this would make sure that all of the policies that are fit to print, as they say, are available through this software, which would go through our website. So that's an enhancement to a system that we already use.
Chief, before you pull this down, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Community policing officer versus community service officers. What is a community service officer?
A couple of months ago, we went to the town council. We've had other agencies, Stonington, Waterford, some other police departments around the state have what's called a community service officer. What that is essentially, in most cases, a younger adult who has an interest in law enforcement that can service some needs of the police department. It's a part-time job. I think the pay plan that was approved is a $15 an hour job where they will help. They can do traffic control. They can do traffic enforcement. Parking enforcement. Help out in the police department. We're going to incorporate them into our community policing program. It's essentially a part-time job to get someone into law enforcement. I see it as a good way of recruiting individuals from our community that have an interest in law enforcement to get them in at a young age, try and nurture them and bring them into the profession. Hopefully we'll get some good candidates. I can tell you we have many officers in our department who are CSOs at other departments. It is a good breeding ground for individuals to explore policing, but also provides the department and the town a service that we need. I do envision using them quite a bit in downtown Mystic and other parts of the town for enforcement. As you know, there's some stuff underway as far as parking in Mystic goes. So my intent is to have them available for that and utilize them in capacities that may be beneficial to the department, not put them in hazardous situations. They won't carry guns, they won't carry tasers, that sort of stuff. But work with police officers in a way that we can mentor them and develop their skill sets and hopefully recruit for our department in the future, but also provide a service right now at a very low cost.
Thank you. Representative Richards has her hand up.
I'm sorry, and that's as opposed to the community policing officer, which is a police officer assigned to the community policing unit.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Representative Richards, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Representative Rusk, and good evening, Chief Asaro.
Good evening.
I had a couple of questions about that line item as well in the budget, the line item 10247 for community-oriented policing. And I did follow your discussion with the town council as well on this and talking about this because that budget item has gone up quite a bit. And I know some of that has to do with exactly what you're talking about, adding a new community policing, some staff, the social worker, I believe also goes under that.
Sure.
And some of the program cost.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Okay. You want to take a stab at it?
Yeah. What we did is over the last couple of years, we've tried to put people in the right places. So for instance, our officers that do community policing, as well as the social worker, if we were to get approved for that additional community policing officer, and our 2 school resource officers are in that line item. So before they were in different parts of the budget where they would show as a patrol officer. Well, our the 2 officers that work in the schools, we get reimbursement from the Board of Education for it. So you'll see that in the form of a salary adjustment, but we have to put them in the budget somewhere. So where you see that what looks like a big spike in the cost, that's because those line items were removed from other parts. So those personnel costs shifted from patrol into community policing. So it wasn't, they aren't all an increase. The increase with the community service officer, the community policing officer, and the social worker are in that, but the rest are incumbents that we had and we took them out of a different part of the budget. But I hope that makes sense.
Okay, that does help to clarify, because adding up those other items wasn't quite that like 300,000 jump. So thank you for that.
And I confirmed that with fiscal, because when I looked at it and I saw what people were referring to, it did, you know, it looked like where did all this, where did this huge steep increase come from? But it does come out of elsewhere in the budget.
One other question on this area as well. And I wonder, and as you know, I was on the court committee as well, and talked about a lot of these issues, and I have an interest in having community
Sure.
policing. I'm very glad to see that in the social worker as well. But I'm wondering why it isn't more of an orientation for the entire police force, instead of what seems to be happening here is that it's more just specific officers who will be dedicated to that, but others wouldn't be.
Sure. Turn back the clock about 6 years, just under 6 years when I came to the department. So we have a community policing program. The problem was we had a community-oriented mindset. Our officers had ownership patrols. Our officers are, you know, community-oriented. However, prior to that, there were dedicated police officers. One was in Paquonic Bridge, one was in Navy Housing, and I think there was a third in downtown Mystic, where that was their exclusive duties. They didn't answer calls for service. They networked with the youth in the neighborhood. They had events. They participated in certain activities that our patrol officers really don't get to do throughout the course of their shift. They may do that for a short amount of time, but if they get called to a car accident, a burglary, domestic violence incident, they're leaving and they're going to something else. The community policing officers that are dedicated to that are done, they do that exclusively. That doesn't mean they can't respond to calls if an emergency happens in their immediate area, but they're not assigned to a patrol area. They're not assigned to regular duties that a police officer would have. They wouldn't be responding to calls for service. They're doing that exclusively. I used the name before, and I think you've probably aware of her, but Heather McClellan, she coordinates our program. She works with other town staff very closely at the senior center, the library, as well as with Parks and Rec to gather some programs. She also works in the schools where she teaches there. And then this morning we were talking about reinstituting some activities like Coffee with a Cop activities, things of that nature that we've done in the past. And because of COVID, we haven't had the ability to really do. So community-oriented policing is a philosophy. Our department does adopt that. Specific community policing officers are to do those tasks. And they aren't encumbered by the traditional policing activities or patrol activities that other officers have. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Excuse me, Chairman Rusk, I have to leave the meeting now. So I sent you a text message, just, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you. I see what you're saying. I still wonder, you know, are there police forces out there that don't separate that as much and more have it as double duty for officers to, I guess, be doing both of those things? And also, I wonder if you have different credentials that are required when you hire a regular police officer versus a community policing officer.
No, the credentials are the same. We don't hire someone specifically to be a community policing officer. They're usually a more seasoned officer that demonstrates those skill sets, someone that's been more apt to be engaged with the public in a way that seems to work well. And I think that's what we've got right now with Officer Cullen, and adopts some of these, gets involved in some of these activities outside of the traditional policing role. Other departments do this. Other departments have, even in this local area, there are, I know of at least one department that has about 10 officers assigned to their community policing unit. I don't know whether they do it on a rotational basis, but they're not assigned to patrol. They're assigned to community policing duties. And what that is it could be anything. It could be, you know, we have a problem in a particular area, and maybe we want to put those officers assigned to do some problem-oriented policing solutions, work with the community, the businesses, the residents, people that are in that neighborhood for a variety of reasons, work with them to come up with some solutions to problems that they see, or to just work with some of our youth groups or other entities within the town to make a positive influence and hopefully prevent some criminal activity happening in the future.
Okay, thank you. That's the end of my questions.
To any other, the committee member, Representative Kasiri.
Thank you. Just wanted to address your question. Can't make a video. I'm having Wi-Fi issues, so if I cut out, just let me know. I think it would be helpful if for how staffing works. And with my meeting with the chief and the rest of the department, they made it very clear. There's the admin, there's the chief, the deputy, the captains and lieutenants. There's the investigative division. There's they're in charge of the whole division. And then there's 3 shifts. So there's days, afternoon, and mids. There's enough officers right now to handle routine calls. And therefore, calls require 1 officer, which is like an accident or a larceny. And then there's some calls that automatically, so occurring.
Broken up still, I think.
You're breaking up.
Am I back?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry, where did I cut off?
You were talking about how a number of officers, like one goes to a routine call.
Okay. So if there was a domestic, that's automatically 2 officers off the street. If there was a domestic and an accident occurring in the same area, that's automatically 3 officers off the street. So I believe the chief is trying to explain that he needs that extra officer that's exclusively assigned to community policing so that they don't have to answer the routine calls. And correct me if I'm wrong there, Chief.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, some of our officers are assigned specific tasks, as you mentioned, whether they're a supervisor, an investigator, you know, what they have different roles in the department. So we do have people assigned to each shift. These are people taken out of that. So yes, that is correct. And again, this. You know, I just want to be clear. This is something that was an interest to the town council, to the RTM. It was something that was brought up multiple times over the course of the last year. So this is in response to those requests for additional community policing. That again doesn't mean our officers don't have that community-oriented mindset. It means that, you know, we have certain areas where our officers are very busy. Most areas they're very busy from the beginning of their shift on some days, responding to calls for service. So they don't have the capacity to dedicate themselves to the community policing aspect on a full-time basis. These are just 2 individuals that I expect will be essentially hanging a shingle out in front of locations in town, to include the former Fitch Middle School, Navy housing, as well as downtown Mystic, and do those activities that we find useful, and kind of emulate that model that we've had for many years, which is a partnership with the community.
And just to piggyback off what we're talking about right now, I just want to thank you, Chief, for initiating this pilot program of the collaborative social worker. I truly wish this would have been available to me when I was an officer. I cannot tell you how many times that I wanted to know about follow-up with individuals that I had dealt with in crisis. And I just think this is a fabulous idea and program, and I cannot thank you enough for implementing this.
Well, thanks. Hopefully with the support of the RTM, we'll be able to do that, and you know, work with those other agencies out there that can provide assistance, and not just here in town, but some of the regional agencies that help. But having someone dedicated to Groton, helping with this, working with the police on a regular basis is part of the, I think will be a productive person in our department. But thank you for those comments.
Do we have anyone else who has any questions for Chief Fusaro? Then I'm going to throw out my question. Thank you, Chief, for all of this explanation. I really appreciate it. I'm going to ask about the social worker. How many times this last year have you used emergency mobile crisis? Or something like that. I don't mean to.
We use it on a regular basis. The problem is their mobile crisis is out of Norwich. They do work with some departments. We actually had a meeting with them the other day to get them more involved in some of our patrol activities. They don't really go on a patrol with us. I know they work with other departments pretty closely. I can tell you about one incident that we had in particular where they did come out to it back a couple months ago. Unfortunately, that was kind of the end of the road. They came out to the incident. It was an individual that was having some problems, led to a long standoff. When I showed up after our officers had been there for some time, mobile crisis came to me and says, "We're leaving." They weren't disrespectful. They weren't abdicating their duties. They said, we're leaving. Since that time, one of my lieutenants has been following up with the individual involved, working with their family, working very closely with them to try and get this person some help. So where they are a resource, they are available. To give you the number, I don't have a number off the top of my head to find out. I can try and get that information, but what I can tell you is they are someone that they are an organization that we utilize, but they're not at our disposal. They don't go on patrol on a regular basis with our officers. They're not here embedded with our officers. They're a resource that's available, but maybe not to the extent that I think is most beneficial. Were we to have someone who was here that knew the community directly, knew the officers, knew these individuals, right? And just in the last couple of months, we've had 3 individuals from pretty serious incidents where I think they would have realized the benefit from having this person to network. I've got a police officer who's very good. He's a supervisor, has many other duties. That individual has done a great job following up on this, but doesn't have the same capacity or same credentials and same connections that a social worker would. And again, that's someone who would be dedicated to this. One of the questions I got from a town councilor was, well, this is only one person. What are you going to do the rest of the time? Mm-hmm. I don't see them being a person that would necessarily respond to every call. That would be impossible. But it's a person that we would have in-house that we can refer things to. Things that right now don't get followed up on. Things that, when a police officer responds to, they have limited abilities to deal with, right? We can arrest someone if they violate a law. We can do an emergency committal, which means we send them to the hospital and they're examined by an emergency room physician who may or may not hold them. But the problem doesn't get solved. The person doesn't necessarily get directed to resources that could be beneficial to them. But the officer's job is done, right? The officer's duties are completed. They've satisfied their requirements. They're on to a different call. This is a person that could now follow up with that stuff and maybe prevent problems from happening again. Because when we go to one of these incidents, we're always afraid that this isn't the last time we're dealing with an individual. The person I mentioned before, maybe there are future incidents that can be avoided where we don't have to expend that type of energy and resources and, call in additional agencies to come and assist for an individual who's in crisis that may be a danger to themselves or others. If we nip that in the bud and we have someone here that can direct them to those resources that aren't readily available to a police officer, I think that would be a useful tool. And that's what I've seen in other. And again, I told you I read some reports and saw some things out there in the public domain where I think other police departments have really realized benefit. And I've also heard loud and clear from council, RTM, there's state legislature, other public officials. There are things that police officers aren't necessarily the best people to solve a particular problem. During the winter months, we get calls about homelessness. We get calls about people that are maybe not in crisis, but certainly have mental illness issues. When people don't know who to call, they call the police and they expect us to do something about it. If we had a resource here that was someone we could direct to these problems, we could get the police officers working with them, but really under the auspices of the social worker. We don't have that capacity now. And again, while there is mobile outreach and there are mobile crisis services and our dispatchers connect with them, we utilize 211, we utilize these services that sometimes are remote. This is someone who's unique to us, who can handle issues here in this town, but also provide those avenues of help that maybe aren't accessible right now through a police officer or through the systems that we have in place.
Thank you, Chief. Representative Kasiri.
Thank you, Chair Rusk. I also just wanted to attest to the fact that I worked for 2 different police departments that utilized mobile outreach, where we actually had the riders with us. Mobile outreach is a great resource. They are wonderful when we have riders. However, when the riders are not there, we often don't get the resources outside of the department. And I also just wanted to piggyback off of what the chief was saying in regards to deterring incidents from occurring. I have had an incident that has stuck with me since I was an officer, where there was an individual who would not have been someone that had dealt with the police other than his mental health crisis. And I, to this day, wonder what happened to that individual, because I just didn't have the resources. I worked midnights. There was no time to follow up. And I truly wish that resource would have been available to me to follow up with this individual, because it just would have been a great resource. So.
You know, that I can provide kind of a similar example. We had officers here expend a lot of time several months ago with an individual. Without getting into the specifics, there was some mental illness issues. There were no criminal acts. There was nothing criminal about it, but there were some complaints from neighbors that led our officers to become directly involved and had to try and muster other agencies together to help this individual who had problems caring for themselves, was resistant to help. We ended up having to have a patrol officer work with this person and try and get other agencies to address this issue. And I'm being a bit cryptic because I am sensitive to the fact that there's people in our community watch this and they may know what I'm referring to. So I'm trying to be vague, but were we to have a social worker involved in that, and we got some help from our human services, but if we had someone that was directly involved in it, that had that ability and those connections and could dedicate themselves to addressing that problem, that would have been helpful. And it wouldn't have been a police officer doing it. It wouldn't have had a person in uniform out there doing this. You know, maybe we could have done the initial assist, but the person following up and the person really handling it could have been a social worker. Again, that highlights the fact that there is a need. Again, police officers are that you make that call, you know you're going to get somebody on the other line when you call the police department. So if you don't know who to call, you call the police. And we do send people out for these calls for service, but some of them, while we try to address it, if they're not criminal in nature and there's something that we really don't have the capacity to handle other than making an arrest or doing an emergency committal, our hands are kind of tied. So having someone else available, again, someone that we would make available to other agencies, I think would be useful. And from the data I've seen, it is useful in other communities.
Thank you, Chief. Representative Adams or Representative Thomas, do either of you have any questions? I don't think I'm missing anyone.
Yes, actually I do, sorry.
Okay.
Just as far as like the social worker goes, do you envision like what sort of reports, like similar to like how police officers do reports on whatever they encounter in the field? Do you envision the social worker doing similar reports?
Yeah, to an extent, yes. But if they're doing it in their capacity as a social worker, some of that might be protected information, which I would expect a report from them outlining what they can report. That makes sense. If there's protected health information, if there's things that can't be shared with other agencies, that might remain confidential. We're now researching some policies that other departments have in place to do just that, make sure that they protect the information they need to protect, but also to document what they're doing for activities and how they're spending their time. So in an overview sense, yes, I responded to this many calls, I assisted this many people. The specifics as to whom and where they sent and directed for resources are probably pieces of information that would be, I want to say not recorded, but certainly not reported if it's things that were confidential shared with others because of privacy issues.
Of course. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, they would have to be anonymized in some fashion. And also, as far as like the amounts that are being allotted for the additional requirements according to the police accountability bill. Now you did an addendum breakout of that, which I definitely appreciate, and it's great to see that level of detail. When we do the closeout report, like next year in the next budget, would there be an additional, would we be able to get an additional breakout, like with that level of detail as far as like what was actually spent?
I could certainly try and do that. Yeah, it would be in our estimates that we provide to the town manager, the mid-year estimates. Those, again, those are my best guess. They may be considerably less. They may be considerably more. I felt it was important to provide the council and the RTM and the town manager, for that matter, some idea of what I thought those estimates were. We haven't done it before, so we really don't know. The hard reality is there will be a cost, but yes, I can try and put stuff together, figure out exactly what it did cost, and maybe compare it to what we came up with. My hope is it would be less, but I think it would be improper for me to go before you and say, hey, it's going to cost money, but I have no idea what it's going to cost. It's going to be a lot, and just throw an arbitrary number out there. I tried to do some analysis and put some what I thought were relatively conservative numbers with it. My hope is it will not be that much. I don't want the taxpayers to have to shoulder an unnecessary burden, but there are costs associated with it. I felt it was important to articulate that to you.
Understood completely, and I agree. And I do appreciate the efforts of, estimating higher than anticipated possibly, or what the actual may be, just so that, we don't get hit with a hard reality on the other end. So it's nice to have that kind of buffering. But of course, due diligence being everything what it is, having like an actual track on the other end is, see if there's any adjustments that need to be made in the future would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else? Representative Adams, can you just confirm that you are on? Because I know we had issues last year.
Yes, okay. I'm here.
All right, I just wanted to make
sure.
sure.
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, then seeing no further questions, the number that we have is 9,258,908. So I'm going to call for a vote on that number. All those in favor? Can you actually, you know what, I'm going to do a roll call. Representative Richards.
Yes.
Representative Kasiri.
Yeah.
Representative Adams.
Yes.
Representative Thomas.
Yes.
Representative Rusk is a yes. And am I missing anyone? Okay, then I will close that. So then our next.
Thank you. Good night.
Oh, Chief, I think you're still on.
I'm still on. Okay.
You are still on. Thank you for hanging out with us. We have technology. Is that part of that number? I'm sorry.
Are you talking about the
CIP?
Okay, yes, it is. No, it's not part of that number. That's separate. That's what I talked about before, which was our the only CIP we have this year is for the in-car cameras. Again, that's a mandate from the state. I think it's 60. I have to turn to that section of the budget, 60 some odd thousand, but that's what our estimated costs are going to be. It's extrapolated out over 5 years. That's what we did with the body worn cameras. We didn't pay it all up front. There's a little bit of a reduction if you pay up front, but I think the more prudent approach is to do it over the 5 years, which would outfit all of our patrol vehicles as well as our supervisor vehicles with in-car cameras as required by Public Act 20-01 accountability law.
Okay, so I have CIP It's 7F. Is that how, I'm sorry, I don't know how the town has normally states that. But it is 7F.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it for $66,000. Can I get a motion for that?
Kasiri so moves.
Adams, second.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on that? So it's $66,000 for squad car cameras and body cams. Anyone have any questions? Okay, seeing none, I will make,
Representative Frost has her hand
One
up.
question, please.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Representative Richards.
Thank you, Representative Rusk. I was just wondering if you could give us just some idea of the numbers of how many new squad cameras would be purchased and how many needed to be upgraded, just to get an idea of what that $66,000 does for us.
Yeah, that would be all of our fleet. That would be all 18 Mark Cruisers, supervisors' vehicles. So that we would not be able to use the ones that we have. Frankly, since we got the body cameras, those have kind of been sunset. Some of them still exist in cruisers. They're older technology. They're not really, they're older technology and they don't really network with our body cameras. I mentioned before, we use Axon body cameras. We've been very, we've really benefited from these. And I think that they've been a useful tool, despite the fact that initially some of our officers had some angst, myself included, about having a camera on you 24/7 when you're working. But we've kind of embraced it. But what the service that we use, Axon, which is a company that also makes tasers, which you've probably heard of. We're looking to go with them so that the cameras would network with one another. So if two police officers were at the scene, they had their body cameras activated, the cruiser camera was on too, we'd be able to put them all together in one video clip that shows it from 3 different angles. That's one of the features these have. You know, I might also add that we've become kind of a subject matter expert on this. I've got departments from all over the state that have come to look at what we have for a setup, not because of me or the deputy chief, but because we got some pretty skilled people. Our police support specialist, Bob Stroll, is the guy that really runs it. He's the one who kind of gives a little bit of a lecture to other departments that are looking at it and want to see what we've got and what we've implemented it. We're doing the same with the squad car camera. So it's the same company. So all of them would be outfitted. So maybe that was a little bit of a long and drawn out answer to a pretty question, but each one of our cars, the patrol, not detectives' cars, not unmarked cars.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? And I'm going to call the vote for $66,000. I will do another roll call since we're on Zoom. Representative Richards?
Yes.
Representative Kasiri?
Yes.
Representative Adams?
Yes.
Representative Thomas?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Am I missing anyone who's come on since then? Okay. Thank you, Chief Pissarro. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
The next item we have up is account number 1090, City of Groton Police Budget. Their number is $2,688,256. Can I get a motion?
Kasiri so moves.
Second by Richards.
Thank you. Sorry. Let me just catch this up. 2,688,256. All right. And we have with us Mayor Hedrick, Chief Spellman, and Finance Director Ron Uhas. Can someone, Chief, do you mind giving us just a quick overview of changes from last year?
My direction from Mayor Hedrick was to prepare a services neutral budget with no additional personnel. Our retention has been good within the department, but we have had some retirements. The majority of driving the increases in our budget, we've stayed very static with our fixed costs, which has allowed to keep our increases to a minimum. Also, we were cut last year, a vehicle. I present a loaded budget, unlike the town. The town presents an operations budget. They have a SIP separate line from that, and they have personnel that are in the education budget. This is the total cost of our operation, everything from the SIP, retirement, fixed costs, everything. Our total increase is 3.80% over the year. Our agency has had 3 deliverables, and I was spoken to by a previous RTM that they long sought interoperability. The state radio system that we recently went to, and I want to thank the RTM and the Groton Town Council for allowing us to go on your SIP program for one occasion, and we were able to create that interoperability as we recently went on the state radio system. We got body cameras off a federal grant, and we've had in-vehicle cameras for some time. We're also able to get the CAS card system, which is the Citizens and Autism Spectrum software, which we've expanded to a card system, Citizens at Risk database. We have that populated in our dispatch. We use that to assist as a tool out to our residents, and we're able to do that on a donation. So we were able to get 3 major IT deliverables during the pandemic. Our fleet situation is such that is driving that vehicle that we will need will be about $77,000, a little under $78,000, which will keep our fleet modern. And it was a cost we were hoping to have last year, and we did have some increases in our vehicle maintenance line because that vehicle was not replaced. A couple of things we have community policing is a philosophy. It's not a line item. Our outreach has been very effective out into the community. Our cost is primary salary with some OT, some volunteer hours. The de-escalation training that was a part of HB 6004, the recent bill that came out, we have a certified instructor in the de-escalation training certified by the Dolan Law Group and through Post. And we were able to give that to every member of our department last year, excuse me, concurrent with them being trained in using the body cameras. In this coming fiscal year, there are going to be some costs that may be unpredictable. The cost of body cameras are going up in other communities as they become mandated and more customers come into a smaller area with a limited vendor to provide the service. So you may see that in other avenues of HB 6004 that drives cost. We do not have SailFest this year. So any cost anticipation that we had there, I was able to use existing city contracts to mitigate cost. And also without that as a line, we were able to not have an increase at that point. I warned the town council that that may be something I can't guarantee in the future. I'll be leaving the position shortly, but my successor may be coming to you with an increase driven by that line. We do have a major event at Fort Griswold with a anniversary event that they're having there, and that will task and utilize city police resources for public safety at that, because we're expecting heavy attendance. And as we come out of the pandemic, I think people are going to go to that event. Quite frankly, because it'll be a great event, and it'll be something that they want to go to. I'm proud of our department. We're probably the most diverse of our size as an agency in the region. We have a very high solve rate, and Very proud of the men and women in this department that get out and do everything they can and to positively interact with the members of our community. And our work with ALEC, we have a officer who is ALEC certified. We've been able to train our entire department in that discipline. Some of the de-escalation techniques that are incumbent in ALEC blend very well with the de-escalation training that we had with the Dolan law group. I concur with Chief Pizarro when he was discussing that you have people that will file an FOI request and are requesting body cam footage. And that's a cost that can be difficult to put a finger on as to what you're going to be dealing with down the road. And I anticipate more people will take advantage of that, and that will be something that a service that we provide to the public that we may incur additional costs with. If there's any questions of the RTM, I'd be happy to answer, and if I can't answer your question now, I'll be happy to answer further offline.
Thank you, Chief. Does anyone have any questions? Moderator Evans.
Thank you, Chair Rusk. I do have a question. I just am noting in the budget book that we have, it says the police budget is an increase of 4.1%. And yet I believe I just heard the chief say it was 3.8. So I was just wondering where that 0.3% ended up, or where the discrepancy is. Thanks.
Within, I have a, I'm not privy to your book, and I'm looking at what I have, and my increase is indicating 3.80%.
The increase there is based on the request for funding, and the way that the funding request is it's based on the total police budget minus the chief's salary and all of the expenses related to the chief, and then it's 50% of that minus any other revenue streams that would come in. There was a decrease with parking tickets, and again with the increase in the capital. So that's where that 4.12% is coming in. That's in the request. The chief was referring to his budget as a whole was the 3.9 or 3.8.
So just to clarify, the increase, the budget that the town RTM, the town is paying is 4.1% an increase over last year. Is that correct?
The request for funding, correct.
Thank you.
If I may, Madam Chair, I think it's an excellent program that you're going into with the social worker. In domestic violence cases in particular, in a community policing format that was run under Chief Esserman in the city of New Haven in the mid 2010 to about 2016, they did a follow-up the next day after a domestic incident with a social worker at the home as a gateway to other services. We use mobile outreach already in the city and have them come in on that basis. But Chief Stewart is looking to use that within Stonington. It's a program that they had significant success with. I had spent time with Congressman Courtney a couple of years back discussing that, and that may be something that should we start to get some funding along the lines of some of these unfunded mandates that come forward, that may be something that we put to work on a regional basis. And I just want to applaud Chief Pizarro for his forward thinking there. And I think with that program that was in place down in New Haven, it might be something that we take a look at, and it's something that you can measure immediately with recidivism. If you have someone go out and they've met with a family that's in crisis, and they do not have follow-up domestics after the, should we say, intervention, when we have a social worker go out and talk and move them into different programs that are available, and maybe even alternative programs that the court has available. That may be a program that pays for itself literally and reduces the calls for service. One thing we've had great success here with is working with Community Speaks Out, and I cannot applaud Joe and Tammy Delacruz for the great work that they do with Community Speaks Out. We assigned a liaison officer who is bilingual, so that's increased our outreach into the Latino community, and there is no community that is exempt from the ravages of heroin. And we've had great success with their gatewaying people into treatment and getting people some help and getting them clean. And ultimately that makes a safer community. It builds trust between law enforcement officers and the community they serve. And I think this is a direction that law enforcement is going to be going in the years in the future. And I think it's a trend that we should embrace and work with. And I just wanted to impart that to the RTM and people that are serving on the RTM that have a particular interest in public safety, is plant that seed that hopefully we can go that direction down the road. Thank you for your time and courtesy, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Anybody else have any questions? I'm not seeing any raised hands. Okay, then I am going to call for funding in the amount of $2,688,256. I am going to start with Representative Richards.
Yes.
Siri?
Yes.
Adams?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Thank you. And Rusk is a yes. All right. Thank you, City of Groton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, RTM. Very good.
Okay. Our last item of business tonight is account number 1091, which is Groton Long Point. I believe we have Chief Knowles on and David McBride, who is the Groton Long Point president. Am I missing anyone? No. Okay, so then let me get to the correct page. My apologies. So we are moving the number of $331,000.
Siri, so
thank you. Can I get a second?
Second, Richards.
Thank you. Okay. Chief Knowles, do you want to discuss your budget?
Sure, absolutely. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just making sure the technology is working. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dave Knowles. I became chief of Groton Long Point in August of 2018. Prior to that, I had a 31-year career with Stonington Police Department, retiring in 2016 to take the position as an account manager for the security firm at Pfizer, leaving that position in August 2018 to take the chief position. The Groton Long Point Police Department was established in 1921. Today, it consists of 9 officers, 4 full-time of the members of the collective bargaining unit, and 5 part-time members. I'm the only administrator responsible for all the aspects of administration: policy writing, rewriting, ensuring compliance with the state, local, and federal regulations, as well as ensuring we run as smooth as operation as possible. We hire retired officers as well as lateral transfers. They're seasoned law enforcement officers and are well aware of the significance of embracing the community policing philosophy. I am attempting to diversify the staff as we speak, but officer availability is limited to those who may wish to retire and continue in law enforcement following their career. We have 2 patrol vehicles, 1 administrative vehicle. We provide 24/7 coverage with 1 officer assigned to each shift. Town police will back us up on cases such as domestics or car stops. In return, we will provide mutual aid to the town and will even be dispatched as primary when the town officers are tied up or there's a need for an additional officer. For most calls of service, we are self-dispatch, although 911 calls are received via radio from Groton Dispatch, as we share the same radios and radio codes, which increase our interoperability with town. We are held to the same standards of all law enforcement units in the state of Connecticut, and we are post-accredited. The department may be small, but no less responsible for meeting the needs and exceeding the expectations of the state of Connecticut and the community we serve. We too are affected by the events that have transpired over the last year. We recognize the changes are needed and the change come with a cost. For the past 2 budget cycles, the department was level funded at $288,000. To meet the requirements of the unfunded mandate set forth by the new accountability law, I'm asking for an additional $43,000 over the 288. That brings us to the number of 331. I believe this is a nominal increase, is fair, and it will help GLPPD attain the goals of meeting the mandates and continuing with the current staffing levels. Thank you, and I hope I get your consideration for the increase.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions? Representative Richards.
Thank you, Chair Rusk. My question is related, well, I guess it starts with a comment, actually. I do see and understand the need for the new costs related to the police accountability law mandates. I'm glad they're in place, and I think that we need to make sure that they're funded correctly, and I think that the town has some responsibility in that. That is a $25,000 increase itself over what the town has done before, and in total it's a 43% or 43,000, excuse me, increase. And I understand your thought at the 50%, but is there anything additional this year that would also validate a need for some more cost within this budget?
I can tell you with confidence that we set up a program with the Yale New Haven Health, and I started sending some of my officers for the drug testing, because in order to keep their post-certification, they have gone through the post-recertification program, but they had to take the drug testing. That cost is $175 a piece plus overtime. So to this point, there's been 3 that have gone. So that's additional. In addition to that, again, we have to also fund not only the body cameras, but the dash cameras. I have the quotes that I've gotten also from Axon. And the reason why I'm going to go with Axon is because of the interoperability with town police, city police, and other police departments in the area. Right now, we're in the phase of trying and testing out the body cameras. But ultimately, and again, that's broken out over 5 years on a SIP. And, so what you're seeing is a $25,000, but the cost is certainly more than that. And we usually handle that down here with our SIP program also in GLP. So there are additional costs. They are, mostly pertain to the accountability law, and that's where you're seeing the increase.
Thank you. I have one additional question, if I may, and that's relating to the philosophy of community policing. And I would like to just hear how that may be incorporated at the GLP Police Department, or if there are any plans to orient towards that.
We, as a rule, are community police officers. I look at it this way. I come from Stonington, and I have to say, not to get off the beaten path there, but talking about bringing on a social worker is absolutely on point, because we had a domestic violence coordinator back in the 90s, and it helped us out immensely in Stonington. But we are community police officers. That's our main function. We are community police officers that focus on community policing with law enforcement backup. Most departments have to do law enforcement and hope they can complete the community policing task. You come down here at any time, you will find that we are always interacting with the public. We know what's going on. We know where people live. We know pretty much everything about the people that are here. One thing you have to understand is during the summertime, and also during the course of the year, we have a lot of people that come down and rent. So they come down from other areas of you know, other states, and we try to get to know everybody. But it does change down here occasionally because of that. So our job is to, you know, patrol and to ensure that we know what's going on in our community. So again, we're fully certified, post-certified police officers, and our focus is community policing with law enforcement, if that helps you out.
Thank you for that explanation. I'm glad to hear that is your focus.
Any other questions? Representative Kassiri, I'm sorry, I do see your hand.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. Chief Knowles, I was just curious if part of the $43,000 increase is also due to raises and benefits through collective bargaining?
Yes, ma'am, it is. We did have a new contract go into effect in July of 2020, so it will also incorporate the increases in pay and wages.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'm going to call for a vote for the funding in the amount of let me just make sure I got my number right. $331,000. Representative Richards.
Yes.
Kassiri?
Yes.
Adams?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
And Rusk is a yes. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a safe night.
You too. Okay, that is all we have for tonight. So I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Adams.
Kassiri seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Jill, can I ask you a question real quick before you go?
Yes, ma'am. Do you want?
Are we still recording or not?
Let me stop recording. Hold on. Let me see if I can figure out how to do that.
Records at the bottom.
There we go.